Yeah, it's a pleasure to introduce you to Stavros and Charlie. And they will talk about UBI. And this is really close to my heart because we've just learned it's all about the data that we're collecting and getting into it. And now we will hopefully learn a little bit more on how this works. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so we've got a lot to get through, so we're gonna rush through as much as we can. Who are we? I'm Charlie Hull, Open Source Connections, been in the search game way too long. A bit about me, Stavros.
I'm Stavros Macrakis. I've been in the search game for a while as well, at various places. But the interesting part is that I've done it both at the organization that uses search, the organization that sells search, and the organization that sells search systems to others.
Great. So Open Source Connections, for those of you who don't know us, this is the sort of things we do. We do consulting, we do training, we run the Haystack conference, and those are our focus areas on the left. And then Stavros from OpenSearch.
So OpenSearch is a full service open source search system, Apache 2.0, so it's a real open source. And our users do everything. So e-commerce search is certainly an important case, but all the way to log analytics. So log analytics is a huge application, and of course, document search. So it is a fork of Elastic 7.10. So a couple of years ago, we forked, and we are the pure open source version. You can run it on your own machine. You can run it on Google. You can run it on Azure, or you can run it on our web service, which our AWS service, which supposedly works better. Up to you to decide. Okay, so what are we talking about today? Not Turkey, no, okay, no problem. So I think we all agree that all search needs behavioral data. And what do we want, especially in e-commerce, we want the behavioral data to reflect a bunch of things. One thing is business metrics. So the first side, the standard today is you go to a standard metrics vendor, analytics vendor, you get a package, it's typically SaaS, and you can get all sorts of interesting information about page flow, about abandonment, about click frequency, and even about sales. But what you don't get is the very narrow, granular data you need to search to tune search. So how do you tune search for e-commerce? You need to know which searches lead to sales. You want to know what sequence of events happen, what the user journey is, how are they using your facets, how are they using recommendations, and so on. You want to know, well, I've already said it, my standard failure mode, getting ahead of myself. So another thing is that we know that every corpus and every user population is different. Now, you'll be very happy to know that I'm not going to read this slide. This slide is to show you how many different use cases there are, and this is just a limited sample. We have, even within e-commerce, it's very different to search for plumbing supplies and to search for fashion. And we've seen this in the previous presentations, that each area has a different constraints, different desirable properties. But I think there is a central concept, which is that search equals relevance ranking. Now, relevance ranking, maybe not relevance ranking in e-commerce, it's relevance ranking and the effectiveness of selling. So merchandising is one name for that. Renee gave a really nice talk about this last year at Haystack, right? Well, okay. So what's our project? It's called User Behavior Insights. And User Behavior Insights, the goal is to collect all the information you need to evaluate search at high granularity. So every damn event gets collected. Now you may say, oh, that's too much. But these days, you know, memory is free, disk is free. So we don't worry about that. We worry about collecting all the data. What did this user search for? What were the results? Were the results reasonable? You want to know what the results are reasonable, so you have to collect all of the results, not just the ones that they click on. You want to know how they refined the search. Did they modify the query? And by the way, so search session is an interesting concept that's been discussed a bit. One definition of search session is everything that happens after a search. And then the next time you change the query term, it's a different search. In our discussions internally, we've decided session really isn't all that useful. What you want to know is the sequence of events that someone's done. You want to know also the logic of the events that they've done. What is being acted on? You want to do analyses both forward and backward. What did this search lead to? and what led to this product. So you say the orange pet rock, how did they find that? Did they find that through image search? Did they find that through searching for pet rocks? Did they search for toys? What exactly, novelty toys? Who knows how they got there? So you want to know all these things. You want to know how they clicked on things. And most critically, I would claim you want to know how the actions are connected causally, not how they are just in time, but you want to know this search result, the number 3 search result for the orange pet rock was clicked on. And then maybe the number 4 result on pet rock was clicked on. And maybe on that result, they put that result in the basket. Then maybe they went back to search and searched for something else. And maybe they took that thing out of the basket. All of these things are causally related in the sense that you can connect them back to the particular search that led to that result. Not in time, but in dependency in some sense. So that's what I call causality. And I think that was probably not a good choice of term because it took me a while to explain it to Charlie. Or maybe that was Charlie's problem. So a couple of years ago here at Berlin Buzzwords, we had a bunch of interesting search professionals in the room, and we asked them, what should every search implementation do? And we usually did the usual thing with the post-it notes and so on, and we ranked them and we voted on them and all that. And then we asked another question, which is, how many of these things are you in fact doing? So we ranked these results here you see in Berlin Buzzwords are ranked by what people are actually what people are actually doing. And you see that logging search reactions was the thing where there was the biggest gap between what people thought they should be doing and what they were actually doing. And of course, this leads to all sorts of other things. All the red things are things that you can do using the data you collect by logging the actions. It's a prerequisite. On the right, I have the customer gaps list, which is I went and talked to AWS customers and asked them, so what do you do? How do you do search and so on? And in that case, I was doing the diagnosis. I was not asking them what's the gap you perceive, but it was the gap that I perceived. And the first gap, by the way, is that they didn't think of search as a discipline, which is a pretty serious problem. But the second gap was they weren't doing logging. And the third gap, they weren't doing very good quality evaluation or tuning. So, miss a slide here. Did I misorder the slide? No, okay. So, so what is search? I mean, the first thing we do, we all talk about how you generate results. And people at the buzzwords, you do lexical search, do semantic search, neural sparse, like splayed-like approaches and so on, hybrid and whatnot. A lot of people like talking about that. People talk less about the upper right corner of this graph, namely the measurement and analysis. Here, we've been talking a lot about it, which is great. But at a lot of the other talks, they don't. And they don't talk about search tuning. So I would claim this is a cycle of relevance. This is, again, something that we talked about at Buzzwords last year, and people agreed that this was a good representation. So where does user behavior insights fit into this? In the upper right-hand corner, you see in yellow, that's where it goes, measurement analysis. But it's also a prerequisite for all of these other things in measurement and tuning. So we claim that user behavior insights, the collecting of the data, is foundational to doing a good job at search. So what are our priorities? We discussed what are the priorities of this project. Should the priority be to generate code? Should it, should it be education? Maybe it should be education actually. But no, we decided the first priority was the schema. We should have a standard schema for representing this data. That's not even code. And then secondly, tools for collecting data. And third, a way of analyzing and displaying data, because we believe that the analyzing and displaying the data is something that people can build on once they have the data. If you don't have the data, you can't analyze or display it. So we have not emphasized the eye candy, the beautiful graphs and so on. What we've emphasized so far is actually getting the data in a reliable way. Now we have some principles behind all this. First of all, that the full data is available for your analysis. It's not behind some wall or another. All the data is under your control. This is not being sent to some central repository. It's extensible. The schema is extensible. So if you have specific needs in your area, you can extend it. It is search engine and data store agnostic. So I'd love to hear from those of you who are using Vespa or even search And you know, search, yeah. So it doesn't matter what search engine you're using. We're happy to work with you to collect the data. You do need to do a little plug-in, but it's not a major thing. The collection of PII, people ask us about PII. PII is clearly an important problem, but it's something that's very dependent on your market, on your customers, what you've asked your customers for permission to do, and so on. We do not intervene in that. We do not have a policy about PII. That is your policy, not ours. We do everything through secure mechanisms, so we make sure that nothing gets stolen from you. And it's near real time, so that our goal is to make it fast enough that you can do within session, bad word, but within session optimization of results. Now, what are the applications? I think they're pretty clear to this group. Manual tuning, which you shouldn't ignore. Bayesian parameter optimization, which is underappreciated as a technique, but you gave a very nice talk on last year, the year before at Haystack? Yeah, 2 years ago at Haystack. So adjusting the parameters to your search ahead of the search, rather than doing re-ranking with learning to rank. Semantic model fine-tuning, which we all know about, learning to rank. And also an area which I think is, again, underemphasized. So some people have sort of hinted at it, which is, can you use a learning to rank type approach for blending lexical and neural embeddings in a better way than any of the ad hoc approaches? This is all pretty obvious. I'm not going to go over it, especially because Charlie is breathing down my neck. I can feel it. So what is the project? How did this work as a project? Well, a couple of years ago, Eric Pugh and I discussed this at Haystack and MICES in the US. And I said, shouldn't we be standardizing this? And he said, yes. So that was easy. And it turns out, so yesterday, I learned from Alessandro that this is something that was proposed to the solar community. He proposed to the solar community, I think in 2017. I didn't see, where's Alessandro? Oh, there you are, yeah. Right in front of me. So, but unfortunately that project didn't have money behind it, I guess. And it didn't go anywhere. So we would love to work with you, by the way, to improve this. We put out an RFC, so using the standards open way of approaching things, we put out an RFC on GitHub. We revised the RFC. We debated the name of the project, which is obviously the most important part. We started out with user behavior logging and decided that logging was the wrong word. And we present this often at our community meetings of OpenSearch. Everything we do is open on GitHub. It's an Apache 2 license. You can take it, you can steal it, whatever you call it. And now it's up to Charlie.
Thank you, Stavros. So, Open Source Connections, we're search consultants. And just a little bit of insight as to why we're excited about UBI. So, can I get rid of that little box? I can, brilliant. So this is a diagram from a presentation by Peter Fries from a Haystack conference way back in the day. We've used it ever since. It's a fantastic illustration of the offline and the online methods of search tuning. So on the left, you've got your offline stuff. You're doing some, maybe so you've got some human judgments. You're doing some experimentation. You're rapidly as possible trying out new ideas, new solutions. And then when something is evolved that looks useful, it goes to the online side. It feeds the online side. And that's where you're doing things like A/B testing, which takes longer, but you're trying things in production maybe. Now, the trouble is there aren't solutions for all of these bits. I mean, you know, we've got things like Cupid on the human judgment side. We've got RRE from the SEAS team. We've got not really a lot around A/B testing we know of. And then you've got Clickstream. Now, when we go and see clients, often we ask them, how are you analyzing what people do with your search? And they say, we've got Google Analytics. And then we say, okay. Now, there's a great blog post by my colleague, Matthias, about how you can use GA for search tuning, or it'll be something from Adobe, or be something that has been cooked up by their own web analytics team. If they've got a huge analytics team, then brilliant. If they understand search, then even better. But a lot of the time, you haven't really got a good solution. So this is really where UBI fits. And that's really exciting for us as search consultants. So what makes up UBI in practical terms? The first, I think the most important thing is the shared schema. Defining what the user's actually searching for. That's the user query, not necessarily what the search engine gets in the end. What do they get back? What are the results? And then how do we track the resulting events, what people do with those results? You need some code on the user side to collect these events. It's going to be a scrap of JavaScript, pretty obviously. And then an implementation in some kind of search engine to facilitate this process, collect those events, and eventually, for example, do dashboards and analysis, aggregations, that kind of thing. So OpenSearch, this is where the project's been founded and where it's coming from. But there actually is now a spike for Solr, just to illustrate that this isn't just for that one search engine. And again, the most important thing is this schema, is that causal connection between what the query is and what the follow-on actions are. We can track that all the way through. So this is how it works. So on the left, you've got the user's browser, a bit of JavaScript, and on the right, you've got some OpenSearch infrastructure. So someone does a query, and we all know how that works. You do a search, and at that point, we store the query and the results in one of our UBI indexes. Back comes the results, and note there's a query ID, and that is very important. That helps us track the query all the way through. So that goes back to the user, and they get some results. Then the user clicks on a result, in this case, the second result, result B, and we store that, again, taking the query ID all the way through. Then they click through to a product detail page. They want to buy this thing, they're interested, and again, the query ID goes through to that page, and then when they click on the add to cart, we get that event logged as well. That's relatively simple, hopefully, to understand, but there's sometimes some more complicated use cases. So for example, you might want to put some private data in there and log that. So the margin we're making on the product, for example, but it isn't something you want to serve back to the user in the browser. So there'll be an intermediate layer here. We'll kind of hang on to that stuff. So when you come through the subsequent events, you also log that as well. And that's probably a microservice of some kind. I think there's some work being done with the data prepper component of OpenSearch on this. That's roughly how it works. Now, what we've done to demonstrate this and work with it, we have a thing called Chorus. It's an open source reference implementation for e-commerce search. It's got lots of bits in it. You can see here on the OpenSearch side, we have OpenSearch, we have a reactive search front end, we have Quirky, Cupid, lots of other tools. It's all Dockerized. And it's a great way to try out this stuff. And we've been using this to work with UBI. So we have a fake electronics shop called Chorus Electronics. We've scraped some open product data. We've put prices in there. We put some judgments in there. And this is something you can try out. And we've been using that to basically develop the UBI system. Now, I was going to show a quick demo of this working. We don't really have time today, but if you want to check it out, check out the presentations at OpenSearchCon and Haystack US in the last couple of months, which Stavros and my colleague Eric gave. You can see it working for real. This is how you actually use UBI. Here's how you'd actually, you'd send that query through. Note again, this is the user query we're logging. We're also logging what the search engine query is, but it's important we know what the user typed. So we track both of those. The query ID is really important. If we have one on our side, we can pass that in and log it. Otherwise, UBI will make one for you and pass it back. And you can use that in subsequent event logging. So that's important, again, to track that causality. And then you can post events straight through to the UBI indexes. And again, these are just standard OpenSearch indexes, so that you can scale them just as like you scale anything else in OpenSearch to collect that huge amount of data that Stavros mentioned. But we've got lots of documentation, which is a really important part of this, not just the code, but how you're going to use it. Now, this is a question that came up, a standard schema. And this basically reminded my colleague Eric of a cartoon. Everyone loves XKCD. Do you remember this cartoon? We've got 14 competing standards. No, ridiculous. Let's develop a brand new standard to cover all of those things. Now, great, we've got 15 competing standards. With UBI, we're not in this same situation. What we're hoping is, we don't really have a standard at the moment. We're now going to create one cooperating standard. And it's live, and it was close. Basically, we've been working on this on a repo on our side, and it's now been contributed back to OpenSearch itself. It's in a public repository, public as of about 6 p.m. last night. It was marvelously advantageous being at Berlin Buzzwords and be able to talk to lots of Amazon people to get the right buttons pushed to make this happen. So huge thanks to them. It builds for recent versions of OpenSearch. You can see the original RFC, the pull request, and then you've got Chorus. So you can actually see this in action, and it's a great example of how you might build this into your own system. The important thing is, here's the second bullet point here. If this works, what we would like to see happen is every search engine to use the same standard schema. Now, obviously, there's going to have to be some discussion. We need the support of the community. We need folks who work with different engines, be they open source, be they commercial, be they closed source, be they open source. But what we're hoping is this is a way for all of us in the search community to have a way of tracking this user behavior in a standard way. And I think and this is a huge thing. I think, Amazon, AWS, OpenSearch are funding this work, but they have said it's not just going to be an OpenSearch thing. And I think that's a really important and powerful thing. So we're going to be reaching out to lots of people and hoping to get some help around that and see if we can let this become a competing standard. But of course, we welcome comments, input, and I will say there is a survey here, if you'd like to photograph the QR code. Tell us how you're doing this kind of thing at the moment, what you'd like to see happen, and then all of that will feed into the project and we'll make it better. So just to finish, everyone got that? I will say the project's been led from our side at Open Source Connections by my colleague and our co-founder, Eric Pugh. So please reach out to him directly if you've got any detailed questions. I'll do my very best to answer them today. And of course, Stavros, and the link is there. So yes.
Well, I think that's our presentation.
Thank you very much.
As Charlie said, what's going to be critical here is that we get people's support, because this does not implement itself, unfortunately. Every user needs to install the appropriate code on the client side. So that's why the documentation is particularly important.
Yes, so any questions?
Yeah, thanks, good presentation. So this is really interesting, like from but it kind of covers one side of it, collecting these events and storing them. I guess the obvious thing that I'm not sure has been mentioned, probably it's not built yet, is like you need to analyze this data, have a decent web client, like something that, is there something like that already and being worked on?
Absolutely. So we have a demo right now, which we didn't really have time to present today, but a demo of collecting the data, analyzing it in SQL, and presenting it in OpenSearch dashboards. So we will continue to be working on OpenSearch dashboards to support this. If you want to do it in Tableau or whatever, you're free to. You can store the data wherever you want. Our prototype is storing things in S3 raw data. You can store it in your database system, wherever you want. So both the storage part we're agnostic about, but we have a standard schema. The analysis part, again, we'll be building some tools. We hope the community will build tools that are useful to you.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Thank you, great talk. It looks a bit like that we are rebuilding a tracking solution here as well, right? A lot of companies already have tracking solutions implemented, and tracking is more than just logging data. It's also about, I don't know, bot detection, a lot of concerns that are actually making tracking such a hard problem is something that, let's say, professional tracking providers, Google Analytics dealing with. So would it be also an option to basically, instead of just building yet another tracking library, something that more integrates with the currently existing standards? Or how do these two things play together?
I think from my search consultant perspective, yes, people we go talk to have tracking solutions. Not all of them do. Not all of them can afford them. Not all of them have a big analytics team. And specifically, I think what's being tracked isn't always useful for search. You'll get a lot of other information, or they don't really understand the concept of this causality or tracking the query all the way through. So having something specifically for this job, for tuning and improving search, is really valuable. But yes, I mean, it's open. If somebody would come up with an integration for an existing tracking system that would speak to UBI, I think we'd welcome that. But this is designed to be for search people, designed by search people.
Let me add another thing,
Thanks.
which is that we, at AWS, I talk to our commercial customers, and they're names you've all heard of, very large corporations with large search teams, and I ask them, are you tracking search actions? And the answers will typically be, yes, we track clicks. So what do you mean you track clicks? So, well, if you put up a search result and someone clicks on it, we track that. So, well, do you track what they didn't click on? No, should we? And can you connect the original query with what they eventually bought? Well, we're working on that, but it's hard. So we, even with very sophisticated, very large customers, we find that that's missing. Now, there are some customers who do a fantastic job of this. I think Otto, which is not a customer, but Otto is doing a great job of this, and some other companies. But most companies I've talked to, surprisingly, and I was shocked by this, honestly, don't track at the level we need for search tuning.
Yeah, to be honest, we do this since 2018 as well, and there was nothing out there that could do it, and we still see the same. So a lot of companies have tracking solutions, logging solutions, but when you really go down on a attribution level, you rather have the schema or the attribution in place. So thanks a lot for that. Other questions?
So I guess attribution is the e-commerce way of talking about what we call causality.
Yeah. Right. Well, then